Welcome back to Marriage Matters. Today we're going to be talking about something that's very important for us women. We have it wrong so much on so many levels, and this topic of submission is a big deal for a lot of us. I'm a woman who is very independent. I just grew up seeing my dad being a go-getter, being someone really amazing, my mom handling the household. So I kind of took traits from both sides. So that makes me very strong-willed and strong-minded at a point where sometimes I feel I can make him feel like, yo, Shana, I take off the trousers. So like I want you guys to hear what submission is and what submission is not, in accordance to what the word actually says to us.
And there's a lot of factors that complicate people's
Let's
lives.
give them an example of what happened with us at a point where we didn't even understand our roles in the house before we understand what God wanted for us. Like, and bear it all, I have no shame. It's not who I am. We're in a new dispensation now. I'm under the covenant. I understand what those things mean now. But when I was not in that kind of mindset and understanding what that meant in terms of submitting as a wife, when an example that I gave once, I don't know if we've posted that video, when I said that sometimes God would change our seasons where I'd become the breadwinner, and then like you would be in a position of waiting for your season to come through. But I didn't realize that God was only preparing us both to understand that we work as one, and even if I was in a season of getting plenty and more than you, that didn't necessarily mean that I'm the breadwinner. That money is ours ultimately. But I want you, because I feel like at that time is when I didn't understand submission, because I would feel like, wait a minute, but I watched my dad taking care of the household. So when it was now my season to help the family, I would take that like, well, I'm Didi. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like if I give them that background and, kind of give you a synopsis of who I was then, can you relate to that submissive woman being, what we're saying, Kuti, the woman who then takes on lead, as opposed to still understanding you're the head, even if I'm the feet or the neck.
I think that woman, for me, the first thing I can identify is that woman didn't understand submission by God's definition. Again, that woman was subjected to, I guess, the world's subculture of how these things work, the gender roles, if you like, right? But fundamentally, you see, if you're in a situation or a season where the wife is, for whatever reason, making more than the husband, that is not an excuse for the wife to then say, well, because I'm now doing this, you now, to demean the husband, because the wife's, but the primary request from God for the husband is to respect and to honor, right? And the wife is a helpmate. So in that situation, love would have a wife build up the husband and say, no, babe, do you know what? This is just, it's a season.
Exactly.
I still believe in you. I have faith in you. It's going to change. Can we help each other in some way?
Can I cut you there? Sorry, just to interject. There are women who are dealing with what you're saying, but in a long season. You know what I mean? Like you will have a situation where a wife who probably even came into the marriage, or then maybe later on, has been subjected to a man in season of the stay-at-home dad now, technically, or he has things, but then I'll just go batana, and he's always the one that says, baby, can draw eco cash, cannot baby, can draw airtime or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, so it's like the woman is now taking care of the man. How do we
I think we need to be careful here, because submission and finances, I think, are there's synergies, right? But I think that we're now discussing more to do with finances, right?
No, I highlight that, baby, because as a woman, submission when it comes to finances is a big deal. Like somehow it's intertwined for us, because separating the two in regards to now respecting you guys as the man of the house can also be very blurred. That line is so thin. That's what you need to understand.
So my understanding of the Bible, if you see, respect isn't derived from finance. So don't respect me because I have $1 million in the bank. Respect me because I am a child of God. Respect me because we both subscribe to God's way of doing things. Respect me because it is the place or the office that God has put me, and He's only put me there so that I can be a provider, right? He's put me there to be a protector. He's put me there to be a healer. He's put me there to be a pastor. He's put me there to be a, all of these things for the family. So, but in life, as I'm saying, there are different seasons. So I might be good at, for example, leading my family in Christ today, but go through something traumatic and not be so great at it in a week. Doesn't mean that you respect me any less because you feel like you're getting less of that particular thing, right? It's like women, for example. We are called to love you as Christ loved the church, right? So that's agape love. That's unconditional love, right? Pretty much is what that means. So it doesn't then mean that if you, for example, now are disrespecting me and you're putting me lower, my standards of loving you should now deplete because you're not respecting me correctly. And I think this is the contradiction or the worldly aspect that people get wrong. You know, if you are doing things the way God would like you to do them, the wife or the woman having more money than the male is not going to have any change or bearing on that marriage. Right? It's really not, because instead they're not looking at it like his finance, my finance. It's finances that are coming into the household. You both understand that finances are a resource and a gift from God, right?
That's
so
right.
He has, for whatever reason, blessed the lady more than he has the husband in that particular department. The husband may be blessed in other departments,
ways,
that are more important than money, because money at the end of the day is a means to an end, but it's not everything. It's not a happiness in a marriage. But again, because the world has perverted the issue, I mean, and this is why even in the Bible, the only other time there's reference to a God from God himself is the love of money, right? So if submission, if we intertwine or interlink submission with finances, it becomes a very, I guess, dangerous topic, because it's difficult to explain to people who otherwise don't subscribe to God's way that
they're very different.
Having money as a female more than your husband does not give you a right to trample all over him, right? Because you respect or you expect a certain degree of love from your husband, irrespective of your shortfalls or your seasons. So why should it be any different on the other side?
I think what we need to remember as women is that submission is not being controlled. Because I think we then fall under that unfortunate idea that if I submit, it means kuti dojo and I wanna kudara, like how maybe our culture presents it. Submission used to be a certain way when we're seeing Banagogo, you know what I mean? How they dealt with life. So we need to, as women, understand that submission is not, having your own thoughts. Submission is not being controlled or not having your own, perspective or mind or your doormat. Submission is not those things. And once we understand that, we'll be able to channel ourselves into the right way that God asks us. Because it says here in Ephesians 3:21 that submit to one another out of reverence to Christ. And people have a problem of nitpicking that verse. They don't, especially men. I feel like when preachers are preaching in church, wives submit, and respect. Husbands, love your wife like the church. They never dig deeper. And
so what you need to understand is any man that takes that verse out of context, I believe either A, doesn't quite understand it for its true meaning, or B, he himself hasn't quite submitted himself unto the
Christ.
Lord.
That's right.
You see, so even with this issue of the woman making more money than the man, and that becoming, even in that scenario, it's a challenge, because it's being defined by the world and not defined by having two parties equally submit to the word of Christ.
That's right.
Because if you both are submitted to Christ, you're not going to have different views and opinions you're not going to
you're not
going to allow the world to dictate to you what is and isn't acceptable. You're not going to let the world dictate to you to say, my past, I was raised like this, I saw that. Why? Because when we are saved, we are a new creation, and if we're a new creation, we're subscribing to God completely, we're submitting to Him completely. So if we've done that, then my past should have no bearing on my present or future, full stop. The Bible tells me that all of those things, I'm healed, I'm restored from those things. So why should they define how I think and behave in a marriage? Doesn't matter what I grew up seeing.
Sorry, Amos 3:3 actually says that two cannot walk together if they cannot agree. And you're right, because the word says it, so it's got to be true. And it is true, because when you're living the real life thing, we don't want to sound like Bible bashers here, but what Mr. C is saying is so true. Like, if we're not on the same page, we're going to argue, because he has his own mindset about this, and I'll have my own mindset. And if we're so strung up on those mindsets, we're not going to be on the same path. I have seen some women feel like, okay, so I get that this is submission, right? But then what if my husband does say he believes in God and he understands what that is, but then feel like in my spirit this is wrong, right? And she's like, but wait a minute, this is our family home. So I want women to also understand that, like, submission is not blind obedience. Submission is not blind obedience, because if you're also in tune with what word of God, there's going to be a part of you that the Spirit is speaking to you through. And if your husband is so strung up because maybe ato influence or it doesn't necessarily always mean that he's doing the right thing. So you need to pray about that, because I get it. Submission for a lot of women then means he is the head of the house, but you're the helper. It's like I help him.
Conditions of people's hearts are a huge determining factor as to those sorts of situations, right? Because of the journey we've been on and where we are, I know that because I have a wife who loves me, who ultimately wants to see my happiness, my joy, my prosperity, and all of these things, any advice that she gives me is ultimately for my benefit. And because now you pray together, you worship together, if there's something that comes and it doesn't feel right, that there's like a discerning that will happen in that situation, where I'll be like, babe, I know you said this, or you felt like this, but actually, what was the motive behind it, or where was it coming from, or and you'll have a deeper conversation and get to the bottom of it. But ultimately, this is now, the fruits of intimacy, the fruits of unity.
That's right.
So I don't feel like, oh, she's trying to second guess what I'm saying. She's trying to, override more authority. Any authority I have, I only have because I've been given it by Christ. So I should use that authority for His kingdom. I shouldn't use it as a tool to batter her and say, look, listen to what I say because, I'm a man and that's what you should do.
I've got a great example of that. Like, look at the Sermon on the Mount when Moses went up and, God was like, friend, I'm gonna kill y'all because you're still doing this stuff where you're making idols out of gold and you're worshiping those things. And Moses pleaded with God, like, I know that you're God, but you promised that you were not going to kill us again. And just because that was God, Moses still took a stance where he was like, God, you promised. God didn't take free will away from Moses just because he was God. So the same thing in a marriage where God is not saying just because I'm saying to you, submit to your husband, right? He's not saying I'm taking away free will, right? I'm not saying to become rebellious. Don't have the rebellious spirit. Ultimately, this verse was basically saying, God, in his position as Mwari, still allowed Moses to have an opinion, still allowed Moses to reason with him, to say, but Mwari magamboti, right? So I'm not saying now go to your husband and say, well, friend, you said, and be rebellious, but you need to have a humble spirit when you also approach your husband, because there's a way you communicate to him. You can't just be like, well, I feel like you're wrong, so let me just jump in there and say what I gotta say. I feel like before I even speak to hubby, when I feel like this is a very serious situation, I first pray about it. And in the word, it says there's certain things that you can't just pray about, you gotta fast for them too. So if you put yourself through that process first, and then you humbly go to him, because remember in the word, it says that, for men and women, even Mr. Mack and Mrs. Mack, when they were speaking last session, they were like, there's certain ways that we need to speak to each other. I need to speak to you with respect. An innate nature that you have. You need to speak to me in love. It's an innate nature that I have within me. Because I'll be like, yo, wow, how far? And if I come with you with pra, 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 you're going to be like, you're gonna be like, wait a minute, like, where is this going? So like there's a certain way we also have to speak to each other in order for us to maintain that reverential fear of each other and Christ. That reverence, we're doing it in reverence to Christ in terms of submission.
I think my biggest observation is that I think as Christians, sometimes we do things in the wrong order.
Yeah.
So we want to learn about forgiveness, for example, before we've understood love. And not just love, but God's love. Very difficult to do. True forgiveness comes from God.
Yeah.
I can't and won't sugarcoat it for you. So, and until you understand or have a relationship with God to understand the love that He has for you and the forgiveness that He gives you every day, forgiving doesn't become a chore. It doesn't become so difficult. It just becomes, you know what? I'm blessed to be able to forgive.
Yeah.
Right? I'm blessed to be able to extend grace and mercy and all of these things because I receive these things daily and for free. Same thing with submission. You can't talk of submission to a husband or a wife before you understood what it means to submit to God.
That's right.
Right? So, for example, in the Gospels, we're on the Mount of Gethsemane, right? And Jesus is there and He's praying and He's saying, He first references and He's saying, do you know what, God, please take this cup away from me. Like, it's too much, but look, if it's your will, then that's okay. Right? And then the second time He prays and He says, do you know what, God, through my submission to you, basically, right? I will do this. I submit to you, right? I'm paraphrasing here, but I'm trying to I'm pushing the point. And the point is, Jesus, even through the most difficult thing that He had to do for all of us, was always at a point of submission to God, and not only God, to God's will. His submission to God is what led to the love and grace that we all enjoy today. Right, so that's I guess another way of looking at submission, and its importance. You also have verses that will say submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee. Right, but people like quoting resist the devil and he will flee. Right, because that sounds it's easy and it's like, oh yeah, resist the devil, now we know the battles and you run away.
But it says submit to God
the precursor to that is submit to God, right? Which means let's do the right things. Which means let's not talk about I've got more money so I can treat you like trash.
I like that, because when you say submit to God first, right? Everything that the word says about having reverential fear to God, right? It then falls under that submission to God, because when you understand the submission to God, right? Exactly, because as soon as you do that, even if your husband's making less money than you, even if he's not loving you like he should love the church, even if all those things are not being ticked, you're never going to be in a position to disrespect him. You're never going to be in a position to be rebellious. You're never going to be in a position to make him feel like he is not the head of the house. Because so long as those things...
If anything, you'll get on your knees and you'll say, baby, let's pray.
Yeah, and then get him to the same level. Exactly. Yeah.
Baby, let's pray about, that hard thing that you're dealing with.
What can I do to help you?
And that, those are now, that's the harvest now of
seed time and harvest.
Initially to God, but if you don't have that initial stage, you're not gonna have the knowledge. You're not gonna have God's love. You're not gonna have all of the seeds that He sowed a long time ago.
Yeah.
Right, to then enjoy the harvest. Why? Because your hearts are hardened. And why are the hearts hardened? They're hardened because you're listening to the world and what the world thinks. And yesterday in a session we're in, where they kept quoting, "Do not conform to the ways of this world," right? And for me, that's such a huge scripture, because it's like, well, if you think about it, it becomes so easy to do because we just normalize it. Everything. We just, we see it and we say, okay,
that's how
this is the way of the world. This is how,
we can't be Sunday Christians. We gotta be biblical Christians, guys. Like, there's no way that we're gonna live this life the right way, specifically in our marriages, because that is mostly attacked. Because the devil understands what this stuff can do. What the word of God can do in a marriage for other people is incredible. Look at the attacks we dealt with. You guys just watched our video, my video, when I talked about losing the baby. For me, that was an attack. And I took that as, you know what? I'm going to take this. I'm going to take it as a testimony. And I hope those that did watch that feel like they can talk about it, feel like they don't have to be subjected to our cultural norms of this is taboo to talk about that you lost a baby, etc. Let's get out of these cultural norms. Mrs. Mack always says, Christianity is not a culture, it's a subculture. Did I got it right? No? Ah, snap. What'd she say?
Christianity is not a subculture. It's a counterculture.
Counterculture.
Right.
That's it. We need to have her to say that. We need to have her like in a box.
Like it doesn't conform with anything that this world has to offer.
Yes.
So I think the first thing, and that's why submitting to God is so important, because if you submit to Him, you say, okay, you're my final authority. What you say goes. Anything that doesn't fit in accordance to what you have set for me, the parameters you've set only through love and not through, trying to make my life tough, that's what makes sense.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to be lukewarm about it, or if I'm going to be, half and half about it, then we're going to have more tricky discussions on marriage matters.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in again. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.